What if I told you that the social contract, which has governed male and female interactions for the last 70 years, is not just being renegotiated, but is being violently torn up in front of our eyes? What if the so-called princess treatment that has become a modern expectation was never a permanent state of affairs, but a fleeting historical anomaly built on a foundation of sand that is now washing away for good? And what if the key to understanding this colossal shift in our time wasn't found on TikTok or in a modern political treatise, but in the dust-choked archives of post-war Europe and in the cold, hard data of behavioral psychology that was once deemed too dangerous to publish? Let's begin our descent not in the chaotic present, but in the place of seemingly unshakable order. Picture, if you will, a scene from 1959. A young man, we'll call him Robert, returns from his shift at the factory. His hands are stained with grease. His body aches with a familiar, honest fatigue. He walks up the path to a small, neatly kept house in the suburbs, a house he owns thanks to a mortgage he can afford on his single income. He opens the door to the smell of a pot roast cooking. His wife Helen is in a dress and apron setting the table. She greets him with a kiss, takes his coat, and hands him a newspaper. The children are clean and quiet. This scene, replicated millions of times across the Western world, was not just a lifestyle. It was the physical manifestation of a deal, a grand societal bargain. Robert provided material safety, security and status, the castle. In return, Helen provided domestic order, fidelity and a legacy, the kingdom. She was the queen of this small domain. And in that capacity, she received what we can retroactively call the princess treatment. She was cherished, protected, and put on a pedestal, albeit a pedestal within the walls of her home. This was the first and most crucial pillar, the pillar of tangible utility and the bounded kingdom. The princess treatment was never about unconditional adoration. It was a reciprocal agreement, as cold and practical in its foundations as a Roman aqueduct. A man would engage in a form of voluntary servitude, working dangerous, backbreaking or soul-crushing jobs to build a fortress against the world's chaos. In return, the woman was the steward of that fortress. Her domain was the home, the children, the social fabric of the family. Her princess status was a reward for her competence in managing this critical asset. This is the part of the narrative we've forgotten. The reverence was for a role, a vital function in a shared project of survival and prosperity. The man was the knight, yes, but the woman was the castellan, the keeper of the castle walls. Her value was intrinsic and immense because the kingdom she managed was real, tangible and finite. The entire system was built on a foundation of complementary, non-overlapping utilities. This is the first and most profound way our modern world has shattered. The kingdom has vanished. The bounded kingdom, the castle, has been obliterated by a series of social and economic atom bombs. The first was the sexual revolution, and more specifically the widespread adoption of reliable birth control. This single technological innovation did more to dismantle the old female role than any piece of legislation. It severed the inevitable link between sexuality and progeny. Suddenly, the stewardship of the family legacy, the prime directive of the traditional female role, was no longer a default biological outcome, but a choice. And with choice comes a diffusion of purpose. The second bomb was the mass movement of women into the workforce. This was sold as liberation, and in many material ways it was. But from the perspective of the old societal bargain, it was a catastrophic devaluation of the domestic domain. When both men and women are competing in the same external marketplace, the unique complementary value of the female role inside the home is radically diminished. Why be the castellan of a small suburban castle when you can be a junior executive in a glass and steel skyscraper? The kingdom lost its mystique, its necessity. The walls came down not with a siege but with neglect. Now let's visualize this collapse with a story. Imagine a brilliant, ambitious young woman of today. Let's call her Chloe. Chloe is 28. She has a master's degree, a thriving career in digital marketing, a stylish apartment she rents in a trendy part of the city, and a vibrant social life documented meticulously on Instagram. She is the modern archetype of success. She travels, she dines, she has a passport full of stamps and a phone full of memories. She believes, having been told so her entire life, that she is a princess, that she deserves a prince who will add to this life, who will provide the princess treatment, the surprise luxury gifts, the lavish dates, the unwavering emotional validation, the constant proof of his devotion. But Chloe's kingdom is not a tangible asset to be managed. It is a curated performance of consumption. Her apartment is a rental. Her body is maintained by subscription services. Her career is a series of projects for a corporation that sees her as a replaceable resource. A man looks at Chloe's life and subconsciously performs a cost-benefit analysis. In the 1950s, a man like Robert invested in Helen, and by extension in the physical asset of the home and family. It was a joint venture with appreciating assets. What is a man investing in with Chloe? He is being asked to fund a lifestyle, a performance. He is being asked to be a patron of her consumption. The utility is gone. The kingdom is a mirage. He is not a knight protecting a castle. He is a wallet funding a festival. And men on a deep instinctual level are waking up to this reality. They are realizing that the princess has no kingdom to offer them in return for their service, only a demand for more provisions for her solo journey. This is not merely a philosophical observation. It is borne out by terrifyingly cold data. Let's talk about the work of anthropologist David Buss. For decades, Buss has studied human mating strategies across cultures. His research consistently reveals that while women universally prioritize a man's resources and status, his ability to build a kingdom, men's primary triggers for attraction are youth, health, and most importantly, fertility cues. Now consider the modern landscape. The average age of first-time marriage for women has skyrocketed into the late 20s and early 30s. Female fertility begins a significant decline after age 30. From a purely Darwinian perspective, which is the level at which these deep-seated instincts operate, the modern high-achieving princess in her late 20s and 30s is signaling a conflicting message. She's demanding resources fit for a queen, while her biological signaling of the one thing men are instinctively wired to seek, a reliable vessel for their genetic legacy, is demonstrably fading. This creates a profound subconscious dissonance. The man feels the pull of an ancient instinct to provide, but the reward mechanism, the successful propagation of his lineage, feels increasingly risky and uncertain. The deal is broken. The data from dating apps is a horrifying petri dish for this phenomenon. Studies of platforms like Tinder and Hinge show a brutal skew. The top 10–20% of men receive the vast majority of female attention, while the majority of men are virtually invisible. Women, armed with the illusion of infinite choice, are swiping on the same small pool of men who physically resemble the prince of their fantasies. But these top-tier men have no incentive to offer the princess treatment. Why would they? They have a near-infinite supply of potential partners. They can offer the bare minimum or less and still have their pick. The result? The average man seeing this dynamic play out simply disengages. He stops wiping. He stops asking. He stops trying. He looks at the invoice for the princess treatment and decides it's a bad investment. He becomes, in the parliament of our time, quietly done. This is the first great collapse. The collapse of the tangible kingdom and the complementary utility that made the princess treatment a sensible strategic bargain. The castle is a ruin, but the princess is still in the tower waiting for a feast that will never come. But the fall of the first pillar, the kingdom, would not have been fatal on its own. It was the collapse of the second pillar that turned a crisis into a catastrophe. This second pillar was the most insidious and powerful force shaping modern relationships. It was a psychological weapon of mass destruction, developed not in a military lab, but in the hallowed halls of post-war academia. Its creator was a man who believed he was building a better world, But instead he unleashed a social virus that has poisoned the well of intimacy for generations. He authored a study so explosive, so destructive to the foundational myths of female nature that its findings were systematically buried, its data ignored, and its very existence relegated to the footnotes of history. It was a study that proved with mathematical certainty the very thing that modern men are now discovering through bitter experience. This is the story of the second pillar, the forbidden research and the great betrayal that made the disappearance of the princess treatment inevitable. Now we will unearth the single most suppressed document of the 20th century, a study so explosive it proved with clinical precision that the very concept of unconditional female loyalty was a necessary lie to rebuild civilization. We will expose the academic cover-up, name the researcher whose career was destroyed for telling the truth, and reveal how its findings are now playing out in real time in the lives of millions of men. This is the forbidden knowledge that explains why the withdrawal is not a protest, but a correction. The bill for the fairy tale has finally come due. The first pillar, the kingdom of tangible utility, had crumbled into dust, leaving the princess in her tower, waiting for a feast that would never come. But a structure can often stand on a second support, even after the first has fallen. For the age of the princess, that second pillar was not made of brick and mortar, but of something far more potent and fragile, a shared story. It was a narrative carefully cultivated and fiercely defended about the inherent nature of womanhood. A story of innate virtue, unwavering loyalty, and a pair-bonding instinct so powerful it could tame the wildest male heart. This was the mythos that justified the continued princess treatment long after the practical reciprocal reasons for it had vanished.